You wasted my life, Agnes. You gave me nothing. No son, no daughter, nothing. If I had married another, maybe I would not die like this." Those words sank deep, cutting her soul in a way no knife could. Once upon a time, in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, lived a woman called Agnes. She was 48 years old, a widow, and barren. Her house stood like a shadow among the bright homes around it. Paint spilling, silence heavy, no sound of laughter or children running around. It was not always like that. Once, many years ago, Agnes had dreamt of a house filled with little feet, sweet cries, and the smell of baby powder. But dreams had long abandoned her, leaving her with only emptiness and regret. Agnes had married Matthew when she was just 22. He was a tall, hardworking man, and in his early 20s. Their marriage was filled with hope. They loved each other dearly. Every night, they would whisper plans about their future, how many children they wanted, how Matthew would teach his sons to fix things around the house, and how Agnes would teach her daughters to cook. Those whispers became prayers. Those prayers became pleas, and eventually, those pleas turned into silence. Years after years, and no child came. Doctors were visited, herbalists were consulted, pastors laid hands and prayed until their voices went hoarse. Some nights, Agnes wept until dawn, her pillow soaked, while Matthew lay awake staring at the ceiling, pretending to be asleep. Their love began to wither under the weight of disappointment. By the 10th year of their marriage, Matthew's family had turned against her. His mother often said loudly in front of neighbors, "A tree that cannot bear fruit is firewood." What is a woman's value if she cannot give her husband a child? Matthew, once her defender, began to believe those words. His laughter became scarce. His smiles disappeared. He stopped eating her meals with joy. Sometimes, he stayed out late, drinking, returning home with the smell of perfume that was not Agnes's. Agnes pretended not to notice, but inside, she broke. She wanted to leave, but where would she go? She had no family left, no children to cling to, no place to call her home. She remained, swallowing bitterness, hoping one day things would change. Then 5 years later, Matthew fell sick suddenly. It was a strange illness. One week he was fine. The next week he was bedridden. Agnes cared for him, feeding him, bathing him, cleaning him like a child. But instead of thanking her, he cursed her. One night, while fever burned through his body, he whispered cruelly, "You wasted my life, Agnes. You gave me nothing. No son, no daughter, nothing. If I had married another, maybe I would not die like this." Those words sank deep, cutting her soul in a way no knife could. 2 days later, Matthew died. Agnes buried not only her husband, but every last drop of hope she carried. At his funeral, his relatives refused to comfort her. Some even spat in her direction. She sat by the grave, staring blankly, her heart empty. From that day, Agnes lived alone. She managed the small provision store they had built together. And though it gave her enough to eat, it could not give her joy. Her nights were long and quiet. She sometimes left the radio on just to feel the silence. But no matter how loud the music was, she could not silence the emptiness inside her. Years passed, and her hair turned gray at the edges. Wrinkles deepened on her face. Her eyes, once filled with dreams, grew hollow. Neighbors pitied her, but some mocked her behind her back. Children often sang cruel songs outside her window. Mama Barren, Mama Barren. She has no child, she has no child. She has no man, and she has no children. Agnes would close her ears. The words burned anyway. She sometimes thought of ending her life, but fear of hell held her back. Instead, she dragged her feet through each day, waiting for death to find her. Then one morning, everything changed. It was a bright Monday. The sun rose lazily, casting golden light over the rooftops. Agnes stepped outside to sweep her front yard when she heard the faint cry of a baby. She froze. The sound was soft yet sharp, cutting through the air like a bell. Her heart began to race. Slowly, she turned her head. Across the fence, her new neighbors had moved in. She had noticed the couple 2 weeks earlier. A young woman with gentle eyes and her husband, a tall, hardworking man. They kept to themselves, but they greeted politely whenever they passed. Agnes had not cared much. She rarely cared about anyone these days. But now, she saw the young woman step out, cradling a newborn baby. The woman's name was Oma, only 27 years old. Her husband Daniel was 32, a mechanic who left for work every morning before sunrise. They were newly married, and God had already blessed them with a son. Agnes stared as Oma kissed the child's forehead. The baby's skin was soft and glowing. His tiny hands waved in the air. His cry, though sharp, sounded like music. Oma smiled proudly, whispering, "Shh, shh, Samuel, Mama is here." Samuel. The name struck Agnes like lightning. It was the same name she once dreamt of giving her son if she ever had one. Her chest tightened, and for the first time in years, her eyes filled with tears that did not stop. She quickly wiped her face before Oma noticed. From that day, Agnes's mornings changed. Every time Samuel cried, she stopped whatever she was doing to listen. At first, she told herself she was just curious, but curiosity soon turned into longing. She began to time her sweeping, her errands, her cooking, just so she could catch a glimpse of Oma holding her baby outside. One afternoon, when Oma noticed her watching, she smiled and walked over. "Good afternoon, Ma. Would you like to hold him?" Agnes's heart nearly stopped. Her hands trembled as she stretched them out. The baby was so light, so warm. He smelled of milk and innocence. Agnes pressed her cheek against his soft hair and closed her eyes. For a moment, she imagined he was hers. For a moment, the emptiness in her heart disappeared. Oma laughed gently. "He likes you. Look at how calm he is in your arms." Agnes forced a smile. "Yes, he feels like a blessing." But inside, something stirred, something dark and desperate. She did not want to give the child back. Her arms resisted. Her heart screamed, "Don't let go." But she did. She handed him back reluctantly, her fingers lingering on his tiny blanket. That night, Agnes could not sleep. She lay in bed replaying the moment over and over again. The weight of Samuel in her arms, the softness of his skin, the way he had stopped crying. Her heart ached with longing. She whispered into the darkness, "He should have been mine." From then on, Agnes became a frequent visitor at Oma's house. She always had an excuse. Sometimes she brought food. Other times she pretended to offer help. But in truth, she came for Samuel. Oma, being young and trusting, welcomed her gladly. Daniel also appreciated the help, believing Agnes was just a lonely old woman who loved children. What they did not know was that Agnes's admiration had grown into obsession. Every time she left their house, she felt empty again. She began to imagine herself as Samuel's mother, rocking him to sleep, feeding him, calling him my son. She even whispered the words, when no one was around. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Samuel grew stronger, and Agnes grew weaker in her spirit. Her obsession consumed her. She began to resent Oma, not because the young woman had done her wrong, but because she had what Agnes could never have. One evening, as she watched Oma laughing with Samuel in her arms, Agnes clenched her fist and whispered, "God cheated me, but one day I'll make things right. One day he will be mine." Her mind was no longer a safe place. Her silent pain had become dangerous. Agnes's life began to change the moment she first held Samuel. The soft weight of the baby had filled a hole in her chest she thought would never be mended. From that day on, her heart grew restless whenever she was away from him. She tried to fight the feeling at first. She told herself that she was only helping a young mother. She reminded herself that Samuel belonged to Oma and Daniel, not her. But the more she reminded herself, the more her longing grew. It was like telling a starving person not to think about food. Every time she heard Samuel's cry through the thin wall that separated their homes, she felt drawn to him like a moth to a flame. Agnes began to rearrange her days around the sound of the baby. If Samuel cried in the morning, she would leave her sweeping halfway done and rush to the fence, pretending to check her plants. If Oma stepped outside with the baby in her arms, Agnes would appear almost immediately, smiling politely, always ready to say, "Do you need help?" At first, Oma found it comforting. She was still adjusting to motherhood, and having an older woman around made her feel supported. "Agnes is kind," Oma told Daniel one evening as she prepared his food. "She really loves children. Maybe God will still bless her one day." Daniel nodded, not paying much attention. He was tired from work and happy that his wife had someone to talk to during the day. He had no idea that Agnes's kindness was being poisoned by envy. Agnes spent more and more time in Oma's home. She washed small clothes, rocked Samuel to sleep, and sometimes even fed him. Oma trusted her so much that she would leave Samuel in Agnes's arms while she quickly attended to chores. Each time, Agnes's heart beat faster and her grip on the child tightened. She always returned him, but each time felt harder than the last. At night, Agnes lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing phantom cries that were not there. She would press her pillows to her chest as though it were Samuel, whispering, "One day you will be mine." Her obsession began to show in little ways. When other neighbors came to admire Samuel, Agnes grew irritated. She would find excuses to take the baby from their arms, claiming she knew how to hold him better. If Oma laughed loudly while playing with Samuel, jealousy burned inside her. She told herself that Oma did not deserve such happiness. She was too young, too careless. Agnes convinced herself that she, a woman with experience and wisdom, would raise the child better. One afternoon, Agnes visited Oma's home as usual. Samuel was lying in his crib, kicking his legs, while Oma prepared food in the kitchen. Agnes walked over and lifted him gently. He stopped fusing and looked into her eyes. For a moment, she felt like the world had frozen. She smiled down at him, tears filling her eyes. "You belong to me," she whispered. Oma's voice called from the kitchen, breaking the spell. "Agnes, is he calm?" "Yes," Agnes answered quickly, wiping her tears. "He's perfect." But her mind would not rest. The thought of leaving Samuel each evening became unbearable. Every step she took back to her lonely house felt like punishment. She started to spend hours planning scenarios where the boy would live with her permanently. She imagined telling neighbors that God had finally remembered her. She pictured herself walking to church proudly with Samuel by her side, silencing all those who had mocked her for being barren. Her dreams became darker each night. One particular evening, Agnes was walking Samuel on the porch when Oma's cousin stopped by. The young girl laughed as she played with Samuel's tiny hands. "He looks so much like Daniel," The same eyes, the same lips, she said cheerfully. Agnes forced a smile, but inside jealousy twisted her stomach. The reminder that Samuel carried Daniel's blood, that he belonged to Oma's family and not hers, felt like salt rubbed into an open wound. She carried the baby tighter against her chest until he whimpered. Oma noticed and said softly, Agnes, let me have him. Agnes hesitated for a heartbeat before handing him over. That hesitation frightened her. It was the first time she realized how badly she did not want to let go. That night, she could not sleep. She paced the floor of her living room, muttering to herself, why should I suffer like this? Why did God leave me empty? Am I not a woman too? What sin did I commit that he has not forgiven me? Tears streamed down her cheeks. She slammed her fist against the table. I will not die without a child. I will not. Her obsession soon turned into resentment. She began to see Oma not as a neighbor, but as an enemy who had stolen what was meant for her. Each time Oma smiled at her baby, Agnes's heart burned with fury. She convinced herself that Oma was careless, that she did not appreciate the gift she had been given. If the baby were mine, she whispered to herself, I would never take him for granted. I would never let him out of my sight. Her mind began to twist reality. She started speaking to Samuel as though he already belonged to her. When Oma was not looking, she would whisper, call me Mama. One day you will. Sometimes she even rocked him until she fell into a trance, humming lullabies she had never sung before. Her house, once silent, began to fill with small items she secretly bought. A tiny blanket, a baby toy, a feeding bottle. She kept them hidden in her room, preparing for a day she could not yet explain. Agnes's store also began to suffer. Customers complained that she was distracted, often giving wrong change or forgetting their request. But she did not care. Nothing mattered anymore except Samuel. One Sunday, Agnes followed Oma and Daniel to church. She sat 2 rows behind them, staring at the back of the baby's head. When the pastor blessed the children, Agnes closed her eyes tightly and whispered, he is mine, Lord, he is mine. Her obsession grew so intense that even her body responded. One morning, she woke up with her breasts aching, as though her body wanted to produce milk. She stood in front of the mirror, horrified but also strangely hopeful. She pressed her chest and whispered, my body knows. My body knows I am meant to be a mother. From then, she stopped fighting her thoughts. She gave in completely. She no longer pretended Samuel was just Oma's child. In her mind, he was hers. God had denied her. Life had cheated her, but she would not accept it. One evening, while holding Samuel, she looked into his tiny face and said, I will never let anyone take you from me, not even her. That night, for the first time, she thought of taking him away permanently. The idea frightened her, but it also thrilled her. She pictured herself living in the dead of night, carrying Samuel wrapped in a blanket. She imagined starting fresh in a new town where no one knew her story. She would tell everyone that God had blessed her at last. They would call her blessed, and she would finally silence her enemies. Her heart pounded at the thought. But then, doubt crept in. What if she was caught? What if Oma fought back? What if Samuel grew up and discovered the truth? The fear gnawed at her, but the longing was stronger. Each day, the thought became clearer, sharper, harder to ignore. Agnes was no longer just a lonely widow. She had become a woman possessed by obsession, blinded by envy, deaf to reason. Her heart had chosen a dangerous path, and her mind was preparing to follow. She did not know when, and she did not know how, but deep inside, Agnes had already made her decision. Samuel would be hers, no matter the cost. The rains came early that year. Heavy storms rolled through the town, almost every evening, rattling rooftops and turning the narrow streets into muddy rivers. On such nights, neighbors often stayed indoors, listening to the thunder as they huddled around lamps and kerosene stoves. For Agnes, those stormy nights became moments of dangerous thinking. As she sat alone in her silent house, the sound of rain against her roof drowned her thoughts, and the darkness gave her cover to dream of the unthinkable. By now, her obsession had grown into something far beyond control. She no longer simply admired Samuel. She no longer just longed for him. She had convinced herself that he was meant for her. She told herself that Oma was careless, that Daniel was blind, and that only she, Agnes, truly understood what it meant to treasure a child. But what could she do? How could she make Samuel hers? The idea of taking him had first come like a whisper, an intrusive thought she tried to shake off. But the whisper grew louder each day until it became a command. She began to plan in secret, though she never admitted to herself that she was planning. She noticed when Oma left the back door unlocked. She counted how long it usually took for Daniel to fall asleep after returning from work. She memorized the creaks of the wooden floor in their living room. Each detail sat in her mind like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be joined. The night it happened began like any other. The rain poured heavily, lightning slicing the sky into bright streaks, thunder following close behind. The streets were empty. Only the sound of rushing water and dripping gutters filled the air. Inside her home, Agnes sat by her window, staring at the faint glow of light coming from Oma's house. She could hear the baby's faint cry between the claps of thunder. Her heart beat faster. She stood up and paced the room, clutching the hem of her old wrapper. Her mind raced with arguments. Don't do it. You will be caught. You will be cursed. Then another voice inside her pushed harder. This is your chance. God has forgotten you, but you can write your own story. You will never have this opportunity again. She pressed her palms against her ears as if to block out the battle inside her. But the cries of Samuel pierced through everything. The sound was no longer just a baby crying. It was a call to her empty womb, a call to her broken heart. She grabbed an old shawl from her bed and wrapped it tightly around her shoulders. The room felt colder than usual, though it was not the rain. It was fear. It was desire. It was the taste of something forbidden. By midnight, the rain had calmed to a drizzle. Agnes peeked through her window and saw that the lights in Oma's house were out. The street was dark. The only sound was the distant croaks of frogs. Her legs felt heavy as she stepped outside, her slippers splashing in the puddles. She looked around, making sure no neighbor was awake. Slowly, she walked to the back of Oma's house. The very door she had noticed countless times before. The one that Oma often forgot to lock after rushing in with laundry or shopping bags. Agnes reached for the handle with trembling fingers. She paused, her chest heaving. Sweat gathered on her forehead despite the cool night air. For a moment, she almost turned back. But then, she remembered the laughter of children mocking her as Mama Barren. She remembered Matthew's dying words, "You wasted my life." She remembered the empty bed she had lain in for years, her arms holding nothing but pillows. Her jaw tightened. She gripped the handle and twisted. The door opened without resistance. The house was silent except for the soft hum of rain dripping from the roof. Agnes slipped inside, careful not to make a sound. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it would wake the entire household. She tiptoed past the small kitchen and into the living room. There, at the far end, was the crib. Samuel lay inside, wrapped in his tiny blanket, his chest rising and falling gently with sleep. A weak lamp flickered near the wall, casting shadows that danced across his face. Agnes's knees nearly gave way at the sight. She stood over the crib, staring down at him. Her breath came in shallow gasps. He looked like an angel, peaceful, pure, untouched by the cruelty of the world. Her hands trembled as she reached down. She hesitated, whispering, "Forgive me, Lord, but I cannot let him go." She lifted Samuel carefully. He stared, his eyes fluttering open for a moment, then closed again. He let out a small sigh and snuggled against her chest. Agnes's tears fell onto his blanket as she held him tighter. For the first time in decades, she felt whole. She wrapped him in her shawl, pressing him close to her body. Every part of her screamed to run, but she forced herself to move slowly, silently, careful not to wake Oma and Daniel. When she reached the door, her hands were sleek with sweat. She opened it gently, slipped outside, and closed it behind her. The night swallowed her whole. By the time she reached her house, her chest burned from holding her breath. She shut her door quickly and leaned against it, her legs shaking. She looked down at the bundle in her arms. Samuel was still asleep, his tiny mouth opening and closing as he dreamed. Agnes fell to her knees. She kissed his forehead again and again, sobbing uncontrollably. "You are mine now," she whispered. "God has given you to me at last. No one will ever take you away from me." She rocked him back and forth until dawn. Meanwhile, Alma woke just before sunrise. It was instinct. Her mother's heart tugged her awake. She reached for the crib beside her bed, but touched nothing. Her eyes flew open. The crib was empty. Her heart stopped. "Oh my God!" she screamed, leaping out of bed. "Daniel! Daniel! He's gone!" Daniel jumping up, confused. "What are you saying?" "The baby, Samuel, he's not here." They tore through the house, searching every corner. They looked under the bed, behind the curtains, even in the kitchen, but Samuel was nowhere to be found. Oma collapsed on the floor, wailing. Her screams pierced the morning air, waking neighbors one by one. People pushed in, confusion spreading. Daniel ran outside, shouting Samuel's name through the street, but there was no answer. The storm had carried the night away, and with it, Agnes had stolen their joy. The morning chaos consumed the neighborhood. People gathered in the clusters, whispering and pointing. Some joined in the search, combing the nearby streets, fields, and even the drainage channels. The police were called, and officers arrived, questioning everyone. Alma could not stand. She knelt in the corner of her room, clutching the empty blanket from the crib, rocking back and forth. Her tears flowed endlessly, soaking the fabric. "My baby! My baby! My baby!" she repeated like a broken record. Daniel's face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. He stormed through the house, shouting at no one in particular, demanding answers where none could be found. At one point, he punched the wall so hard that his knuckles bled. The police asked, "Did you notice anything unusual last night? Did you lock your doors?" Daniel swallowed hard. He remembered closing the front door, but had not checked the back. Oma's sobs grew louder at the mention of the back door. I forgot to lock it," she cried, clutching her head. The guilt crushed her. Neighbors tried to comfort them, but suspicion already lingered. Some whispered that maybe it was witchcraft. Others said perhaps a kidnapper had taken the child for ransom. The fear spread quickly, poisoning the air. But no one suspected Agnes. She stayed inside her house all morning, rocking Samuel gently, humming lullabies to cover the sound of his soft cries. She did not step outside. She did not answer the knocking of concerned neighbors. She sat by her windows, curtains drawn, staring at the baby in her arms. For the first time in decades, her house was filled with sound, and though that sound was stolen, she did not care. In her heart, she believed she had finally won. The neighborhood had never seen such chaos. The once peaceful street became a place of loud wailing, hurried footsteps, and restless whispers. Everyone gathered in front of Oma and Daniel's house, but no one could provide answers. Oma sat on the bare floor of her bedroom, clutching the small blanket Samuel had been wrapped in that night. Her body rocked back and forth violently, her hair falling over her face. She wept until her throat turned dry, but the tears refused to stop. She whispered the same words again and again, like a prayer gone wrong. My baby, my baby, give me back my baby, my baby. Neighbors tried to hold her, but she shoved them away. Her arms searched the empty air as if she could pull Samuel back from nothingness. Every sound, the creak of the door, the cry of a passing child outside, even the wind against the roof, made her heart leap. But reality crossed her again and again. The grip was empty. Daniel moved like a man possessed. His hands trembled as he stormed through the compound, shouting at everyone, demanding to know who had entered their house. He searched the street with other men, calling Samuel's name as if the child could crawl back to him, but there was no trace. By afternoon, the police officers who had arrived earlier gave their grim verdict. The child had been stolen. They promised to investigate, but their words felt empty to Daniel and Oma. To them, every minute that passed without Samuel was another nail in their hearts. That evening, Oma refused to eat. She lay flat on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling with wide, lifeless eyes. When Daniel tried to lift her, she screamed like a wounded animal, scratching at her own skin. Leave me! Bring me my son! Her voice broke. What is food when my womb is empty again? Daniel knelt beside her, his own eyes filled with tears. He tried to be strong, but his voice shook as he whispered, We will find him, Oma. I promise you we will. But inside, he was drowning. He felt powerless, a man who had failed to protect his family. The days that followed were filled with torment. Oma refused to sleep. At night, she sat outside, rocking the blanket as though Samuel were still wrapped in it. Neighbors who passed by in the early mornings heard her singing lullabies to the empty cloth. Her voice cracked and broken. Some shook their heads in pity, others whispered in fear, saying she was losing her mind. And they were right. Her grief became madness. One afternoon, Oma walked barefoot into the market, screaming Samuel's name. She stopped strangers, clutching their clothes, begging them to return her baby. She grabbed one woman's basket, certain she heard a cry inside. But when she opened it, only yams rolled onto the ground. The market women had to escort her back home, tears in their eyes. Daniel's suffering was quieter, but no less heavy. He stopped eating properly, stopped laughing, stopped speaking unless necessary. He moved through the days like a shadow. His once broad shoulders bent under invisible weight. At night, he sat by the window, staring into the darkness, clenching his fist until his nails dug into his palms. He blamed himself over and over again. If I had checked the back door, if I had woken up earlier, if I had kept watch like a man should. But guilt offered no comfort, only deeper pain. The community tried to help. For weeks, search parties combed nearby villages and forests. Flyers with Samuel's pictures were pasted on walls and electric poles. Some pastors came to pray in the house, declaring that Samuel would be found. Some neighbors brought food, though Oma rarely touched it. Others simply sat in silence, unsure of what comfort they could give. But not all the voices were kind. Some began to whisper cruel words. Maybe they sold the child themselves. Maybe Oma offended someone spiritually, and they took the baby as punishment. Maybe this is not ordinary. Maybe this is from their enemies. The whispers spread, and soon, Oma could feel them in the way people looked at her. Mothers held their babies tighter when she walked past, as though she were cursed. Friends who once visited began to avoid her house. Their isolation deepened, and her madness also deepened. Agnes watched all this from behind her curtains. She did not join the searches. She did not go to comfort Oma. She stayed indoors, rocking Samuel in her arms, whispering that he was safe with her. She heard the cries from next door, but instead of pity, she felt satisfaction. You will cry until your eyes dry out, she muttered, but I will never give him back. Her conscience tried to rise sometimes, whispering that she had committed an unforgivable crime, but she buried those thoughts under layers of justification. God denied me for too long, she told herself. This is not theft. This is justice. This is my reward after years of suffering. Still, her heart raced every time someone knocked at her door. She feared the police might discover the truth. She feared Oma might suspect her. But weeks passed, and no one looked her way. In fact, many neighbors pitied her too, saying, poor Agnes, she must be so sad watching her neighbors suffer when she has no children of her own. Agnes smiled in secret. 3 months passed. Oma's health deteriorated. Her once full cheeks became hollow. Her once bright eyes turned sunken and red. She spoke less and less. And when she did, her words were filled with bitterness. She accused Daniel of not protecting Samuel. She accused neighbors of not helping enough. She even accused God of turning his face away. One night, during another fit of despair, Oma screamed into the air, if I cannot have my child, then let me die too. Daniel held her tightly, weeping with her. He whispered, don't say that, Oma. Please, if you go, what will become of me? What if Samuel comes back and finds no mother? His words silenced her, but only for a moment. Her mind was already fraying like old cloths. Daniel, desperate, began to withdraw from people. He worked less at his workshop, often closing early to rush home, fearing something might happen to Oma. Money became scarce. Their once stable life crumbled slowly, and the house felt like a graveyard. The crib remained in the corner of their bedroom, untouched. Oma refused to move it. She cleaned it every day, folded Samuel's clothes neatly, and arranged his toys as though he might return at any moment. The sight of the empty crib broke Daniel's heart, but he dared not to touch it. He feared Oma might break completely if he did. Every sound in the street reminded them of Samuel. When a neighbor's baby cried, Oma would freeze, her hands trembling, before rushing to the window only to find it was not him. When she saw children playing, her chest burned with envy. Sometimes she screamed at them to stop laughing, frightening the children away. The once loving couple became prisoners in their own grief. Meanwhile, Agnes thrived in her secret world. She had left town shortly after the search began, carrying Samuel with her. She claimed she was moving to live with a distant relative, but in truth, she wanted distance. She wanted to start over, to raise the child without fear of being discovered. In her new town, she told neighbors that God had performed a miracle in her old age. They celebrated her, called her blessed, and showered her with admiration. She walked proudly to church, Samuel in her arms, smiling at the other women glancing at her. For the first time in her life, Agnes felt victorious. But victory had a price. Each night, when she closed her eyes, she sometimes saw Oma's tear-streaked face. She sometimes heard Daniel's angry shout echoing in her ears. On stormy nights, when the wind howled, she dreamed of Samuel being dragged from her arms by unseen hands. She would wake in a panic, clutching him tightly, whispering, "You are mine, only mine." Her madness was not as loud as Oma's, but it was madness all the same. Back in the old neighborhood, hope was fading. 6 months had passed with no word, no clue, no sign of Samuel. The police had long stopped visiting. Neighbors returned to their normal lives, though they lowered their voices whenever Oma passed by. Daniel continued to blame himself, carrying his grief like a heavy load on his back. Oma drifted in and out of sanity, sometimes calm, sometimes screaming uncontrollably. Her once gentle laughter had disappeared forever. The grief had swallowed her whole. And though she did not know it, the very woman who had caused her madness was living a new life in a faraway town, smiling proudly as though she had never been barren. In the new town, Agnes changed the boy's name. She named him Joseph, erasing his real name from her lips. She told everyone the boy was her late husband Matthew's child, born miraculously after his death. The story was unbelievable, but no one dared question her. In their eyes, she was a woman chosen by God, a living testimony. Soon, women began to visit in her home, eager to see the miracle child. They brought gifts, baby clothes, food, toys, saying they wanted to tap into her blessing. Agnes welcomed them warmly, her heart swelling with pride each time someone said, "You are truly favored, Mama Joseph." The church in the town quickly embraced her too. On her first Sunday, she stood before the congregation, Joseph in her arms, and gave a testimony that brought tears to many eyes. "I waited for years," she said, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "People mocked me, even called me barren, but I never lost hope. And at last, in my old age, God remembered me. He gave me Joseph, my gift, my miracle." The congregation erupted in shouts of hallelujah. Some women knelt and cried, asking God to do the same for them. The pastor prayed over her, declaring that her life was proof of divine favor. Agnes stood there, tears glistening in her eyes, not from guilt, but from satisfaction. For once in her life, she was not an object of mockery, but a vessel of admiration. As months passed, Joseph grew under her care. He was bright, cheerful, and quick to smile. Agnes doted on him endlessly. She gave him the best food she could afford, dressed him in fine clothes, and never let him out of her sight. When other children came to play, she grew tense, fearing someone might harm him or take him away. She was protective to the point of paranoia. At night, she would sit beside him as he slept, watching his tiny chest rise and fall. Sometimes she whispered, "You are mine, Joseph. You will never know anyone else. No one can separate us." But no matter how much she tried to erase the past, it lingered in the shadows. On stormy nights, when thunder rolled, she sometimes heard Oma's cries in her dreams, deep haunting wails that pierced her sleep and left her trembling. She would wake up sweating, clutching Joseph tightly, whispering, "They will never find you. I will never let them." Her guilt hid behind layers of denials, but it was always there, waiting to surface. Meanwhile, Oma and Daniel's life were crumbling in the old town. Oma had grown thinner than anyone had ever known her. Her once bright eyes and warm personality had been stolen along with her child. She rarely left the house, and when she did, she walked like a ghost. Neighbors who had once pitied her now whispered cruelly. Some said she must have sinned terribly for God to allow her baby to be taken. Others accused her of carelessness. The whispers cut her deeper than knives. Daniel tried to carry the family, but his strength was fading too. He worked at his workshop during the day, but his hands shook on the stools. Customers complained that his work was no longer steady. Money grew scarce. At night, he sat silently in the living room, his head in his hands, listening to Oma's soft sob from the bedroom. The love between them was still there, but grief had buried it under layers of pain. Sometimes, in the moments of weakness, they turned against each other. Oma accused Daniel of not being watchful enough. Daniel accused Oma of leaving the back door open. Their fight always ended in tears, with both of them clinging to each other, whispering, "We didn't deserve this. Why us?" But no answer ever came. Back in the new town, Agnes's reputation grew. She became known as Mama Joseph, the woman God remembered. People often invited her to women's fellowship to share her story. Young couples sought her prayers, believing her testimony carried special power. She prayed confidently for them, her voice steady, though her heart was built on lies. Joseph grew older, and his resemblance to Daniel became more obvious, though no one in the new town knew who Daniel was. To them, he simply looked like Agnes's late husband. As she claimed, they laughed and said, "He carries his father's face." Agnes would smile, though the words twisted in her gut. Despite her new life, Agnes lived in constant fear of discovery. Whenever a stranger passed through the town, her heart raced. Whenever Joseph cried in public, she feared someone might recognize his voice. She avoided traveling back to her old neighborhood, always claiming she was too busy. Still, she convinced herself that she had won. One particular evening, as she rocked Joseph to sleep, a neighbor visited. The woman, older and gentle, sat by her and said, "Agnes, you are blessed indeed. But tell me, how did you endure those years of waiting without losing your mind?" Agnes paused, her heart skipping. Memories of loneliness, insults, and her husband's cruel words rushed back. She swallowed hard and forced a smile. "I prayed," she said. "I believed God would not forget me. And in the end, he didn't." The woman sighed and nodded. "May God bless us all with your kind of faith." Agnes smiled, but when she was alone again, she burst into tears. They were not tears of joy, but of torment. Deep down, she knew she was not blessed. She was cursed. She had taken what was not hers. She had built her miracle on another woman's misery. But she wiped her face quickly and whispered, "No, I will not regret. If I regret, I will break. I cannot break. Joseph is mine, and I will keep him." Years rolled by. Joseph grew into a lovely boy, full of energy. He ran through the compound with other children, his laughter ringing in the air. Agnes often called after him, panicked if he ran too far. The other women teased her, saying she was overprotective, but they did not know her fear. Each year that passed felt like both a victory and a countdown. She won admiration, yet she feared that one day, somehow, her past would come knocking. And fate was already preparing that knock. Life has a way of uncovering secrets, no matter how carefully they are buried. Agnes thought she had escaped her past completely. She had built a new life, far away from the street where Samuel was stolen. She was now Mama Joseph, the proud mother of a miracle boy. In her new town, people no longer looked at her with pity. Instead, they called her blessed, envied her, even asked her to pray for them. But time is a patient hunter, and fate waits for its moment. It came on an ordinary Saturday morning, nearly 7 years after Samuel disappeared. Mrs. Ruth, a woman in her mid-50s, was preparing to travel. She had been Oma and Daniel's neighbor for years and had witnessed their tragedy firsthand. She had seen Oma collapse into madness, and she had seen Daniel shrink into silence. Ruth had always felt helpless, but she never stopped praying that one day Samuel would be found. That Saturday, she dressed carefully for her niece's wedding in another town. She boarded a bus, humming quietly, unaware that her journey would change everything. The wedding was lively. The hall was filled with laughter, music, and bright colors. Ruth smiled as she watched her niece in her white dress, walking proudly down the aisle. But while the ceremony went on, Ruth's eyes wandered across the crowd. She had always been observant, always curious. And then she saw her, Agnes. At first, Ruth thought her eyes were deceiving her. She blinked, leaned forward, and looked again. Yes, it was Agnes, sitting 2 rows ahead, dressed in a neat gown, her hair tied in a scarf. She looked older, but there was no mistaking her. And beside her sat a young boy, about 7 years old. Ruth's breath caught in her throat. The boy, he looked familiar. His face was striking, his eyes bright, his smile charming. But it wasn't just his charm. It was the shape of his eyes, the curve of his lips, the way his nose stood proudly in the center of his face. Ruth's heart began to pound. The boy looked exactly like Daniel. Her hands trembled as she gripped her purse. She tried to calm herself. It can't be. It's impossible. Maybe it's just resemblance. But when the boy turned his head slightly, Ruth gasped out loud. On his left shoulder, partly exposed by the collar of his shirt, was a dark birthmark. The birthmark, she remembered it clearly. The day Samuel was born, Oma had proudly shown neighbors the mark on his shoulder. My son carries a sign, she had said, laughing. God stamped him before he came to me. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had teased that Samuel was easy to identify because of it. And here, before Ruth's eyes, the same mark stared back at her. Her body went cold. She felt the ground shift under her feet. It's him, she whispered. It's Samuel. Oh my God, it's him. She couldn't stay seated. She excused herself quietly and stepped outside. Her breath shaky, her hands trembling. She leaned against the wall of the hall, trying to process what she had just seen. Her mind ran wild. So Agnes took him all these years. While Oma went mad, while Daniel drowned in sorrow, Agnes was here, raising their child as her own. Her stomach twisted in anger and disbelief. She wanted to storm back inside, drag the boy out, and shout the truth for everyone to hear. But she forced herself to be calm. This was too big, too delicate. She needed to be sure. After the wedding, Ruth followed Agnes from a distance. She watched as Agnes walked proudly with the boy, holding his hand tightly. Neighbors greeted her warmly, calling her Mama Joseph. Agnes smiled, waving like a queen. Ruth's anger deepened. She even changed his name. She erased him. She followed them discreetly to their home, a modest compound not far from the main market. She watched Agnes enter with the boy, laughing as though her life had always been filled with joy. Ruth clenched her fist. You wicked woman, she muttered. You destroyed Oma, and yet you live as if you are innocent. She could not sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her guest room, replaying everything she had seen. The boy's resemblance to Daniel, the unmistakable birthmark, Agnes's proud smile. By morning, Ruth knew what she had to do. She returned home after the wedding and went straight to Oma and Daniel's house. The couple had grown older. Oma's once bright face was now hollow, her eyes sunken from years of grief. Daniel was quieter than ever, his shoulders bent, his hair touched with grey. The house itself felt heavy with sadness, the empty crib still standing in the corner as though waiting for a child who never returned. When Ruth entered, Oma barely looked up. She sat on the floor, folding and refolding Samuel's old clothes. Daniel greeted Ruth weakly, offering her a chair. Ruth, he said softly, thank you for coming. How was the wedding? Ruth's throat tightened. She stared at them for a long moment before speaking. Her voice trembled. Daniel, Oma, I saw him. They froze. Oma's hand dropped the small shirt she had been folding. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. Saw who? Samuel. Ruth whispered. I saw Samuel. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel's chest rose and fell quickly, his fist clenching. Oma's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tears pooled in her eyes before spilling down her cheeks. Ruth leaned forward, her voice stronger now. I went to the wedding. I saw Agnes there with a boy. He is Samuel. I swear on my life. He looked exactly like you, Daniel. And the birthmark, the same birthmark on his shoulder. It's him. Oma let out a scream, a sound that shook the walls. She fell to the ground, pounding her fist against the floor, wailing. My son! My son! They told me he was gone, but he's alive. My baby is alive. Daniel rushed to her, holding her as tears streamed down his face. He looked at Ruth desperately. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? Ruth nodded firmly, her own tears flowing. I am sure Agnes told him. She has been raising him as her own all these years. Daniel's face hardened. His grief transformed into fury. That woman, his part, that cursed woman, she destroyed us. She made us live like the dead while she enjoyed our son. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. His fist shook violently. I will not forgive this. I will not let her get away with this. Omar clung to his leg, sobbing uncontrollably. Bring him back, Daniel. Please, bring back my child. I cannot breathe without him, please. Daniel bent and hugged her tightly, his own voice breaking. I promise you, Omar, I will bring him back, even if it is the last thing I do. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He sat in the living room, staring at the empty crib, his mind burning with thoughts of revenge and justice. For years, he had blamed himself for someone's disappearance. Now he knew who was responsible. The anger inside him burned like fire. Omar, on the other hand, was restless with hope. For the first time in 7 years, she felt alive. She whispered Samuel's name over and over again, clutching his old blanket to her chest. She imagined holding him again, kissing his forehead, hearing him call her mama. But beneath the hope was fear. What if Ruth was wrong? What if Agnes refused to let him go? What if the boy no longer recognized her as his mother? The questions gnawed at her heart. Still, one thing was certain. They would not rest until the truth was revealed. Back in the new town, Agnes remained unaware that her carefully built lie was about to collapse. She continued her daily routine, dressing Joseph neatly, taking him to school, and returning home to prepare his meals. Neighbors still admired her and still called her blessed. But fate was already moving, pulling threads together. The next day, he made a decision. Daniel said firmly, we are going. Omar looked at him with swollen eyes. Going where? To the town Ruth saw them. To Agnes. His voice was sharp with anger. I will not waste another day. Our son is alive, and I will bring him back. Omar trembled. Part of her was terrified. What if Agnes refused? What if the boy rejected her? But her heart longed too much to hold him again. She wiped her tears and nodded. Yes, take me to my child. Ruth insisted on going with them. She knew the place, and she knew Agnes's routines. Together, they set out that morning. The journey felt longer than usual. Every bump in the road shook Omar's fragile hope, but Daniel's grip on her hand steadied her. Neither spoke much, their hearts too heavy for words. When they finally arrived, Ruth led them through the busy market, down a narrow street, and stopped in front of a modest compound. She pointed, that is her house. Daniel's eyes burned with fury. Omar's knees weakened. She gripped Ruth's arm for support. Through the partly open gate, they saw him, the boy. He was running around the compound with other children, laughing, his small legs kicking up dust. His face shone with innocence. Omar gasped, her chest tightening. She would have recognized him anywhere. The resemblance to Daniel was undeniable, and the birthmark on his shoulder was like a knife to her heart. My son, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. That is my son. Before she could move, the door of the house opened, and Agnes stepped out. She carried a tray of food and called out, Joseph, come and eat. The boy ran to her, hugging her tightly. Agnes smiled proudly, kissing his hair. The sight made Omar collapse to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel's anger erupted. He pushed the gate open and stormed inside. Neighbors turned to look, startled. Agnes, he roared. Agnes froze. Her eyes widened, the tray slipping from her hands. She stared at Daniel as though seeing a ghost. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Omar staggered in behind him, screaming Samuel's name. The boy looked confused, clutching Agnes's skirt. "You devil!" Daniel shouted, his voice shaking with rage. "You stole our son. For 7 years, you let us rot in sorrow while you paraded him as your miracle." Agnes shook her head violently. "No, no, you are mistaken. This is my son. God gave him to me." "Liar!" Daniel's eyes blazed. "Look at him. He is my blood. He is Oma's flesh. You cannot deny what everyone can see." Neighbors began to gather, whispering, shocked. They looked at Agnes, then at the boy, then at Daniel. The resemblance was undeniable. Oma crawled forward. Tears blinded her. She reached out to the boy. "Samuel," she whispered, "my baby, my son, don't you know me? I am your mother." The boy stepped back, hiding behind Agnes. He had never seen Oma before. He looked frightened. "Mama, who are these people?" he asked Agnes. Oma broke completely at the word mama. Her wail pierced the air. She clutched her chest, rolling on the ground, crying Samuel's name over and over again. Daniel's fury boiled over. He grabbed Agnes by the shoulders. "How could you? How could you watch us suffer? How could you let my wife go mad while you raised our son as your own?" Agnes's face twisted with desperation. "I had no choice," she screamed. "God cheated me. He denied me children all my life. I suffered insults. I buried my husband with no heir. When I saw him, I knew God had finally remembered me. He was meant for me. You cannot take him now. He is mine." The crowd gasped. Some muttered angrily. Others shook their heads. Daniel shoved her back. "You are cursed, Agnes. You are a thief, a liar, a destroyer. You think you can twist your crime into a miracle? Today, the truth will come out." Oma crawled to Samuel again, her hands shaking. She reached out and touched his arm. "Samuel," she whispered through tears, "look at me. Look at my eyes. You may not remember me, but I carried you in my womb. I sang to you before you were born. You are mine, my son, my first and only joy." Samuel stared at her, confused. Something about her tears stirred him, but he clung to Agnes, his safe place. He buried his face in her wrapper, trembling. Agnes hugged him tightly. "Don't listen to them, Joseph. They want to take you away from me. They are liars." "No," Daniel thundered. "You are the liar." By now, the noise had grown so loud that local authorities arrived. The matter was quickly taken to the police station. Both sides shouted their claims. Agnes insisted the boy was hers. A miracle from God. Daniel and Oma insisted he was their stolen child. The police listened, skeptical but attentive. One officer finally said, "We will settle this with evidence. If this child is yours, as you claim, we will confirm. We will conduct a DNA test." Agnes panicked, her face drained of color. "No, it is unnecessary. He is mine. I told you. I nursed him. I raised him. I... Daniel cut her off. "A thief's word and nothing. The test will speak." Oma, still trembling, clutched Samuel's blanket, which she had carried with her for years. She sobbed uncontrollably as the police wrote down their report. Samuel sat quietly in a chair, confused, staring at Oma through innocent eyes. For the first time, Agnes felt her grip slipping. Her lies had carried her for 7 years, but now the truth was breaking through. The test was carried out within days. The waiting period felt like years for Oma and Daniel. Oma cried non-stop, praying, begging God to return her child. Daniel, though equally broken, tried to stay strong for her. Agnes, on the other hand, grew restless. She refused to eat. She muttered to herself at night, whispering, "He is mine. He is mine. They cannot take him away from me." She tried to convince herself that even if the test betrayed her, Joseph would choose her. But when the result finally arrived, the truth was undeniable. Samuel, Joseph, was the biological child of Daniel and Oma. The room fell silent as the officer read the results. Oma collapsed to the floor, weeping tears of joy. Daniel lifted his hands to the sky, crying, "Thank you, God. After all these years, you have remembered us." Agnes, however, screamed in denial. She clawed at her own face, shaking her head violently. "No, no, lies! It is a lie! He is mine! He is my son!" She tried to grab the papers from the officer, but they restrained her. Samuel, frightened by the chaos, cried loudly. Oma rushed to him, scooping him into her arms. For the first time in 7 years, she held her son again. She pressed her face against his hair, her tears soaking him. "My baby," she whispered, her voice trembling with love and sorrow. "My Samuel." The boy sobbed in confusion, but when Oma rocked him gently, something deep inside him calmed. Though he did not know her, a bond stirred between them. He clung to her dress, his tiny hands gripping tightly. The neighbors who had gathered spat at Agnes, calling her cursed, wicked, and heartless. Some even threatened to beat her, but the police shielded her. Daniel stood tall, his eyes blazing. "You will answer for every tear we cried. You will answer for every day my wife lost her mind. You will answer for stealing our son." Agnes's face twisted with rage and despair. She screamed curses at them, shouting, "God cheated me. I only took what I deserved. He was mine. He will always be mine." But no one believed her anymore. The confrontation was over. The truth had been spoken, and Agnes's world of lies had finally crumbled. The officers finally took her away, but her cries haunted everyone present. The court case that followed drew the entire town's attention. People packed into the courtroom, eager to hear the details of the shocking crime. Newspapers carried the headline, "Widow steals neighbor's child, raises him as her own for 7 years." Agnes sat in the dock, her once proud face now hollow, her hair unkempt, her eyes red. She refused to bow her head in shame. Instead, she stared coldly at Oma and Daniel, who sat with Samuel between them. The prosecutor detailed how Agnes had entered their home on a stormy night, how she had stolen Samuel, and how she had deceived an entire community for years. Witnesses came forward. Ruth testified about what she saw at the wedding. Neighbors confirmed Agnes's sudden miracle child. And even church members admitted they had believed her testimony without question. The defense tried to paint Agnes as a desperate woman who had suffered years of barrenness, but the judge was unmoved. Desperation did not excuse theft. Sorrow did not justify destroying another person's family. When it was her turn to speak, Agnes rose slowly, her eyes blazing. Her voice was steady, filled with bitterness. "I suffered all my life," she said. "I was mocked, spat on, called useless. Even my husband died cursing me. I begged God for a child, but he shut my womb. Then one day, I saw Samuel. I knew it was not a chance. It was miracle, my miracle. I raised him. I fed him. I clothed him. While Oma cried, I gave him love. And now you say I am wicked? If loving him is wickedness, then I am guilty." Gasp filled the courtroom. Oma wept quietly, shaking her head. Daniel gritted his teeth, holding her hand tightly. The judge's voice was firm when he delivered the verdict. "Agnes, your pain does not justify your crime. You robbed this family of 7 years. You robbed a child of his parents. For that, you will serve 15 years in prison." The gavel struck. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Agnes screamed in rage, struggling against the guards. Her curse filled the room. "Oma, Daniel, you will never know peace. He is mine, mine. Her voice echoed as she was dragged away. And just like that, the woman who had once been celebrated as Mama Joseph was now a prisoner, her story forever marked with shame. But while Agnes's fate was sealed, Oma and Daniel faced their own struggle. Reuniting with Samuel was not as easy as they had imagined. Though the boy was their blood, years of separation had built walls between them. He cried for Agnes at night, asking when he would see her again. He clung to her name like a shield, confused by the sudden shift in his world. Oma's heart shattered each time he called for the woman who had stolen him. She wanted to scream, to tell him Agnes was evil, but she stopped herself. He was only a child, innocent of the crime. She realized that if she forced him to hate Agnes, she would only deepen his confusion. Instead, she poured love into him. She sang to him, cooked his favorite meals, and told him stories about the day he was born. She showed him the blankets she had kept all those years, the toys she had refused to throw away. Slowly, Samuel began to understand. He listened quietly, his small face thoughtful. He began to call Oma Mama hesitantly, as though testing the word. Each time, Oma's tears flowed freely. Daniel also worked hard to bond with him. He took Samuel to his workshop, showing him how to use tools, teaching him little things about fixing cars. At first, Samuel was shy, but he warmed gradually. One afternoon, when he laughed at one of Daniel's jokes, Daniel excused himself to cry outside, his heart bursting with joy. Still, the process was not smooth. Some nights, Samuel woke up screaming, dreaming of Agnes being taken away in handcuffs. Oma would hold him, whispering, "It's all right, my son. You are safe now. You are home." The community also learned from the ordeal. Neighbors who had once mocked Oma now looked at her with guilt. Many came to apologize, begging her forgiveness. Some brought gifts, others offered prayers. Oma accepted them quietly, but deep inside, she knew no apology could erase the years of suffering she had endured. The story spread beyond their town. It became a cautionary tale told in churches, markets, and family gatherings. Mothers warned their daughters, do not let desperation push you into wickedness. Look at what happened to Agnes. Agnes's name became a symbol of caution. Some pitied her, saying barrenness had driven her mad. Others despised her, calling her cursed. But no one admired her anymore. In prison, Agnes lived a lonely life. She never admitted guilt, never apologized. She clung to her bitterness until her last breath, still insisting that Samuel was hers. She died one night in her cell, clutching a scrap of cloth she had smuggled in, pretending it was her son's blanket. Her last words were, "Joseph is mine." When the news of her death reached Oma and Daniel, they were silent for a long time. Oma finally said, "May God judge her soul. She stole my joy, but I will not let her steal my peace anymore." Daniel nodded, holding her hand. Years later, Samuel grew into a fine young man. Though his early life was filled with confusion, Oma and Daniel's love rebuilt him. He excelled in school, loved his parents deeply, and often told people, "My parents taught me that love is stronger than lies." But the scar remained. He sometimes asked questions about Agnes, and Oma told him the truth gently. "She was not your mother, my son, but she cared for you in her own broken way. Forgive her and live free." Samuel did forgive, but he never forgot. In the end, the story of Agnes, Oma, Daniel, and Samuel became more than just a family tragedy. It became a lesson for the entire community. Pain must never drive us into wickedness. For the tears we cause others will one day return to us. Agnes sought to silence her shame, but she only created deeper wounds. Oma thought her life was over, but her perseverance brought her child back. Daniel blamed himself, but his strength carried his family through the darkest storm. And Samuel, though torn between two worlds, grew to understand that truth always finds its way back home. The cries of grief had turned into whispers of healing. And though scars remained, love was stronger than bitterness. The most important lesson in this story is that desperation and pain should never push us into wickedness, because the moment you build your joy on another person's sorrow, the false happiness will eventually collapse and bring even greater shame. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.